Hey, let's do some word problems from a recent review. Here we're factoring. I have a nice binomial here, and I notice that 50 and 20 have a 10 in common, and I notice that my x cubed and my x squared have a couple of x's in common. So I'm going to factor out a 10x squared. Remember, when you're looking at the letters, always go with the smallest power. That's how many you have in common. 10 goes into 50 5 times. When an x is removed from an x cubed, x squared is removed from an x cubed, you have an x left over. 10 goes into 20, and the x squared and the x squared would cancel. Here we have a nice trinomial with a lead coefficient here of 1. You should be able to just jump to the answers on these problems. Two sets of parentheses. X goes here and here. That takes care of the x squared. Now I need two numbers. I need two numbers that multiply to be positive 15, so that tells me that the signs are going to be the same. The negative in the middle tells me they're both going to be negative. 15 is 5 and 3. Here we have a couple like the last one. We're going to go ahead and jump to the final answer. Split that x squared up here and here. The negative 20 on the end tells me that the signs have to be different. The only way you can get a negative is if you're multiplying a positive and a negative. To get a negative 20, I'm thinking 5 and 4. If the 5 is negative and the 4 is positive, that gives me the negative 1 in the middle. This one is a little different. I see that I have an x in common in all these terms, so I'm going to factor that out to begin with. And then this trinomial in the parentheses is like the previous problems. We'll go ahead and jump to the final answer. Split the x squared up here and here. Split that 4 up. I'm thinking with a 4, to get a 5, I need a positive 4 and a positive 1. A little bit of a twist on this one. We have x's and y's, but we still have a lead coefficient of 1. Jump straight to the answer. Put an x here and an x here. That takes care of the x squares. And on the end, because you have a y squared, put a y here and a y here. And then now just think of the numbers. How can we get a negative 15? Negative means the signs are going to have to be different. And a 15 is a 5 and a 3. If I put a positive 5 and a negative 3 with my y's, that gives me this 2 here in the middle. This problem here has a lead coefficient that's not a 1. We have to do our AC method. So 3 times the negative 20 is negative 60. Negative 60 tells me that the signs are going to have to be different. I need to break up that negative 60 so that I get this positive 7 here in the middle. So I'm thinking positive 12 and negative 5. Use that calculator technique if the numbers don't come to you so quickly. Split the middle. So 3x squared. The 7x is going to split into a negative 5 and a positive 12x. This splits into those two. Minus 20. Factor by grouping. You do the first two. What do they have in common? That goes in the first parentheses. 3x squared and 5x have an x in common. Look at the last two. Pull out what they have in common. It also goes in the first parentheses. 12 and minus 20 have a 4 in common. Take the x from the first two or the 4 from the last two and put that in the second parentheses. X from a 3x squared will leave me with a 3x. X from a negative 5x leaves me with negative 5. And a couple more here. Same method, AC. 2 times the negative 4 is negative 8. Signs are going to be different. I'm thinking with a 7 in the middle, I'm going to go with a plus 8 and a minus 1, because that gives me the 7. So I'm going to go minus 1x. I like to put the negative first if I remember to do that. Do it by grouping. 2 sets of parentheses. 2x squared minus 1x has an x in common. 8x take away 4 has a 4 in common. Take the x from the first two. You have a 2x minus a 1. 3 and negative 12 multiply to be negative 36. Signs are going to be different. To get a negative 5, I'm thinking negative 9 and positive 4. split the middle. Factor by grouping. Go ahead and do my two sets of parentheses. A 3x squared minus a 9x has a 3x in common. A 4x minus a 12 has a 4 in common. Take the 3x from the 3x squared, you're down to an x. Take the 3x from the negative 9x, you have minus 3. Hey, have a nice day.